Brews and Banter.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, Roman. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Welcome back, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
To America.
Well, I've been in America. I was just in another state. But trips aside, we'll talk about that later. But we have a great guest with us today, Tristan Thai. Please introduce and tell us about yourself. And I apologize if I mispronounce your last name.
Yeah. Tristan Thai. That's sort of like Thailand, even though I have no relation to the country at all. I am a screenwriter. I'm a writer. Most recently, I was a television writer for the show The Good Doctor on ABC, which unfortunately just had its last season, but we had the great finale.
Good show.
Yeah, thank you. And, beyond that, I'm, looking to direct a little short film this summer, a horror short, with the time I've had, while continuing to write and whatnot. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here, Frank and Roman.
Awesome. Thanks for taking your time. How did you get into this?
How did I get into this? It's like, it doesn't really start like I'm going to go do this and you get a job, or even there's a lot of professions where, med school, law school, it's sort of a clear-cut path. Getting into sort of writing or directing, it's a lot of like false starts. So basically, how did I get into it? I mean, I think I started getting interested in college. Even though I grew up in California, being a son of immigrants, I couldn't have been further away from California, if you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Like working in Hollywood was not just something I really thought about. I grew up around very working class kind of culture, working class family. And, we were about like 40 minutes away from LA, but it could have been another state. And even though as a kid, I grew up near this mall called the Point of Hills Mall, which I later found out was actually the Twin Pines Mall for Back to the Future. That's where they shot that famous scene.
Yeah,
that's cool.
But even finding that out, it wasn't something like, oh, that's something I could do. That was just felt like, oh, other people did that. So it wasn't really until I went to college at UCLA where, I would always see film crews on campus. It's one of those campuses that's used a lot in a lot of movies. Like you see it in the background, TV shows and movies like Scream or all these, I remember they were filming that. Just Courtney Cox running down the steps. And I remember I was just a student watching that. And that was like sort of the first time where I was going like, oh, okay, that's, I see people doing that. It's like, oh, maybe that's something I could be interested in. So I think that's really where it started. But even then, it's just a very long and difficult path. When I got to the Writers Guild, something they told me was, and this is how hard it is to get into the industry. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but it makes you feel good. They actually say it's harder to get into the Writers Guild as a professional than it is to become a Major League Baseball player. Those are the odds you're up against.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, how many members are in the Writers Guild, approximately?
That is a good question. I don't have that off the top of my head.
I mean, is it like tens of thousands? I don't know. Is it hundreds? I don't really know.
I would say it's in the thousands, but I think, people go in and out in terms of like retired or people get into the guild, but they sort of, aren't working, the professionals so much anymore. So yeah, that's a good question. I wish I had that on.
No, I was just something I was curious about because I'm thinking about baseball. There's, however many, 40 or 50 people on a team and you got however many teams. It's just,
right.
I was just trying to relate it, but yeah, it doesn't matter. So. But yeah, so I know you're a director and you're a writer. Have you done any acting?
No, I would be a terrible actor. That would scare me. I've popped up on screen a few times, just like in the background, but I would just be horrible just hearing the sound. I'm sure when I replay this, hearing the sound of my voice is going to horrify me.
We'll make it sound awesome. We can make you sound like a woman if you want, whatever you need, like maybe a gladiator, whatever you need.
No, you have a good voice, so it will sound good. And I think most people are like that. They're like, oh, I don't like how I sound on camera, but and I was conscious of that before too. I think I kind of grew out of it and got used to hearing the recording of my voice. But where is your family from?
My father grew up in Vietnam, and my mother grew up in Taiwan. I actually just went back to Vietnam over the summer, and it was fascinating. I actually took my parents and got to see where my father grew up, and he actually came from a family. He was one of 20 children. My late grandfather, who I never met, he passed away when I was already a kid. He had 3 wives at the same time, basically, and he was really this like crazy rich. Came from a crazy rich family, but all of that wealth was lost because of what happened during the Vietnam War. Basically, I remember the hometown that my father. We went back to the hometown that my father grew up in, and he couldn't point out where his house was because back in the day the B-52s basically obliterated that whole area, so they had to rebuild all the roads. So they basically repaved and rebuilt everything. So he had no clue where his old house was.
I asked it because I was wondering if you went back home to see where your family is from, and maybe did that spark any ideas for writing?
I think like that's a good question. I think everything does. It's not so much one-to-one where because this happened, I'm gonna for me personally, I'm gonna write about that. It's more like you take these little nuggets of things that you grew up around with. For example, like even on The Good Doctor, as a room, we'll talk about our, past, a lot of our childhoods and things like that. And we may not write a story that equates with what we lived through, but we'll take little nuggets of information, little emotional truths, and put that into our writing. I think that's always very important, in the stories that you tell.
Yeah, I always wonder, sometimes, like you said, moments happen in our lives, and sometimes they're spark of an idea that could grow into something else, or like you said, it could be incorporated into a story already that kind of relates to people.
Right. Yeah. I had a career, prior to this where I worked in documentaries, so I got to go around and do things like sit around with SWAT officers. I got to do a ride along with a homicide detective. I got to go to Japan and interview. I remember like one of the people I interviewed in Japan used to be part of the Yakuza. So like, all of those things have sort of like, I wouldn't say like I've written about those specific instances, but they've all sort of like filtered in and bubbled up into the work I produce.
And so on The Good Doctor, right? How many people are in this room writing with you?
It varies from year to year. I would say we had one of the bigger writing rooms compared to what it is today with like a lot of the streamers, which have smaller rooms. But because we were a network broadcast procedural on ABC, we had a bigger room because we had like 20, we usually had 20 episodes. So we usually had anywhere from like 10 to 14 writers,
and do you
over the course of the season.
Do you write? I'm sorry. So do you write as you go, or do you write a whole season and then that's how does it sort of play out?
Each show is different depending on how the showrunner likes to do it. Typically I would say in a room like that, you start off, like day one or the first week, you sort of do something called blue sky, which is sort of talk about the overall character arcs that you would like to see throughout the season. I like to see so-and-so character A explore this and that, like this, I like to see how he deals with grief or how he deals with being a father for the first time, things like that. And you sort of, from there, it takes a few weeks, you start to build around that. And then, you start to fill in the details later on. So, finding medical cases and whatnot, and all that comes much later. But as long as you sort of know where it's going, and that's what we always try to do, then it's sort of easier to pop in those details later on.
Sure.
Do you guys research these details? Like, I know it's a medical show, and do you have like a medic who is a consultant for like certain?
Yeah, we actually had quite a few medical consultants. We had a writer, a writer who was formerly a doctor. He was one of the producers, and on staff. He was there every day. I actually wrote my last episode with him. And then we also had medical consultants, neurosurgeons at like Duke University, for example, or another. We had another doctor who worked out at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. So, we would frequently interact with them. And then on set, we would also have medical consultants, basically. So when they're filming a surgical scene, there's always a consultant there making sure these actors are doing, grabbing the right instruments, making the right movements.
Yeah,
answering any questions that need to happen.
Yeah, I was wondering because sometimes you watch these shows, whether it's police or medical or firefighters, you're like, how accurate is it? Like, where are the mistakes? Like,
or that shit's not real. That can't be real.
You're like, no
all
way.
of our stories were based on, real cases and stuff, or real science. And, of course we would have to, in real surgeries, they take course over like multiple hours, right? And it's very monotonous, actually. Mm-hmm. So you do have to cut to the chase and, cheat a little bit. So, if you're looking for pinpoint accuracy, a television drama is not it. But, we weren't making up stories whole cloth. We weren't jumping into the realm of science fiction, so to speak. They were always usually, a lot of times our medical consultants came up with medical stories that they would pitch and be like, oh, that's interesting. That could work well, So these were, unique cases that maybe they looked unrealistic because they're like, oh, can that really happen? But, if you look through like sort of these medical journals, you'd be surprised. You'd find some things that would totally surprise you and be like, wow, that really happened.
Mm-hmm. So every case was based on a real case that happened.
It wasn't a one-to-one scenario where, this is a real case and we're going to like totally use that. It was more like we would use something that would inspire something. So like the characters would be different or, but we would use sort of like, oh, let's use this surgery that they used to fix that guy's leg. But what if we did that and connected that with something else? It was sort of like that.
And you got to make it dramatic, interesting,
Right. There's always like a twist, right? Like, otherwise it'd be boring. My
then
leg
it's a
needs
documentary.
fixing, and the next actor, like, okay, you're done. No one would watch a show. It was always like, oh, some complication that happened, something we didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, what are you two drinking?
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
So we've got a Old Claverock is what this is. It's just a local brewery out here. I forget the name of it, but that's what it is.
They're from like a Rochester, New York area.
Yeah, it's a lager. Just
what do you got?
There's a lot of pressure here. I was just like, what should I drink on here? And I'm actually double fisting.
Oh, okay.
Good.
I'm doing. I got this Victory Golden Monkey.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, I just saw this on social media.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, someone just posted that.
So that's not bad. And then this I haven't had yet. I haven't tried it, but I went to a Japanese market the other day, and I thought, and I was like, oh wow, I've never heard of this. So this is a Kyoto matcha IPA, and it sounds completely disgusting to me, but I wanted to try it. So I'm going to pour this into my Ted Lasso.
Well, oh look, it's green.
Is that green?
Yeah,
green. It's crazy, right?
Nice.
It'd be crazy if you pee it out that color. That'd be cool too. That's probably what the Incredible Hulk serum looks
like. Now, to be honest, like I got this because I was like, what. I don't do this as much anymore, but back in my 20s in college, I was always one of those guys. Oh, that looks weird. I'm going to try that. That looks gross. Like the whole Anthony Bourdain. I'm going to go and try whatever. So
that's from Japan?
Foam subsides, but I'll tell you how it is. But yeah, it's totally green, as you can see.
Mm-hmm. If you turn into a Hulk, that's going to be live on camera.
Yeah. That's what Hulk's urine looks like.
It does.
And that's from Japan?
Yeah, it's from Kyoto. It says Kizakura's first Japanese style IPA from 1995.
Wow.
Like I saw this in the there's like this little small Japanese seafood market, where a lot of people buy their sushi. So I went there to pick up some rolls once. I saw that little fridge, the refrigerator, and I was like, might as well try it. even though I know probably for the first and last time. Honestly, I'll let you know.
You mentioned being in Japan and interviewing someone who's an ex Yakuza. Did you see the show Tokyo Vice?
I've seen. I have a friend who works on that. He's an editor. I saw like the first few episodes, but there's like basically one of the problems with TV is like there's too many shows out there now.
Yeah.
So I'm always bouncing around. I do intend to go back into it because I'm a fan of Michael Mann, but I only saw the first episode. What about you? Were you a fan of that?
It was one of those shows that it hooked me, and I was like, shit, it's 3 a.m. I gotta go to bed. But it was really good. I mean, I thought it was an old show, and they did a really good job of filming it so that it took place back in like 90s.
Right.
So
no, I mean, I do love when that happens. Whatever show like Game of Thrones or whatever, when you're like, oh, I need to watch the next episode, and you stay up till like 4 a.m, knowing that you have to get up in 2 or 3 hours. And you're like, I guess that's the magic of TV, right? It just gets you pumped and excited to want to know more. Okay, I'm going to try this now.
All right. It's not bad, right?
not bad. Not as bad as I thought. It's actually decent.
I was looking at your reaction, see how your facial reaction would be. So I'm like, oh, it doesn't look too bad.
It was one of these like, it's not bad.
It's like I thought it'd be more bitter just because it's matcha, IPA.
Right.
But it was okay. It was decent.
I can't remember the stat.
Me again, I would drink it.
It's like I can't remember if it's China or Japan, but one of those is the they have the highest beer sales as a country.
Really?
Yeah. Like I think the U.S. is like third, maybe
Japan.
But wow. So we drink beer, but it's really just sort of an icebreaker. It's not all we're about. We do things like this. We meet people and we interview other people. But so it's just that's kind of why we start off with one. So I apologize that we kind of waited till 15, 20 minutes until we drank it.
No, because I was just too excited to meet you. We talked to Erica, the agent who put us in touch, and we looked you up, and I was like, oh, this will be exciting. Find out how you really got into it. What I know you said back in college when you saw the scenes being filmed, and you're like, oh, maybe I'll be into that. And then did you ever write anything of like your own that you'd like to bring it on camera?
Yeah, I mean, part of the thing. Oh, and before, let me say, like I went to UCLA, and then after that, I mean, Erica was in contact with people from the LA Film School. I went to the LA Film School right after because I wanted to, come out with a short that I directed. Mm-hmm. So that was very useful in helping me learn about the industry. But I didn't have a script after that, and it took a while. It's sort of hard to figure out where you want your expertise to be in, or where your interests lie. So I've written a ton of scripts. The first 5 that I completed, you could probably just throw away in the garbage. They were bad. I think the mistake a lot of people make. I want to be a writer, and they write one script and they think that's the one, mm-hmm. and they're like, oh, can you read this, and then if you like it, send it to your agent or your manager. And it's like, no, it's like you have to keep writing because your first script will be garbage. It's going to be terrible.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And your second script is going to be a little bit better. But to answer your question, as a writer, before you break in, you're always speccing. You're writing these original pilots, and that's how you sort of get the attention of agents, managers, mm-hmm. or showrunners looking to hire you. And it's strange in a weird way. A lot of times, like when you write these that knowing that no one's going to really make this, because when you start off, you're sort of like a nobody in the industry, right? So the production companies are not going to, for the most part, there's always exceptions, obviously. They're not going to go and purchase a script from someone who's never been in a room before. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, take the case of someone like, like Mad Men. That was a script that was languishing for years, and it wasn't later until Matthew Weiner was more established, that he was able to go back and get that made. So yes, similarly to that, hopefully one of the scripts that I've written, you know, in the past I'll hopefully be able to make it, you know, as years go by and I rise up in the industry.
Resurrect it and sort of come back and tweak it with your current experience and expertise versus what you may or may not have had when you first did it.
Right. Yeah. You know, I have, and yeah, you definitely have to tweak it, because I remember I have one script, you know, where the characters are talking about Derrick Rose and the Chicago Bulls, and obviously that would make it really dated. You know, I just read that recently. I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of dated references here.
Yeah.
But that's a history. It's like it's archive. Don't throw it away. It's a reminder of like where you started, where you came from.
Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned also now, so The Good Doctor's done, and now you're doing something with film, with a movie, a horror movie.
Right now, I am writing a horror feature, but I'm also hoping to direct something. I mean, originally I went to film school, you know, wanting to both write and direct, but obviously, you know, you take all these different paths. So now that I have the time, now that my show has been, you know, I'm a sort of free agent, so to speak. I've been developing a lot of material, I've been pitching, but I'm also like, hey, you know, I need to get back into the directing, back on the directing course. So yeah, there's a short film, a horror short that, you know, I've been trying to get off the ground, and hopefully in a few months I'll be able to get going on that.
Sure.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite genre to write?
I tend to like things that are sort of like slightly grounded in reality. Like they seem like all rule, but there's like, you know, 2 to 5% off. You know, like what? I don't know if you're familiar with the show Severance on Apple TV. Something like that, where it's like there's a little bit of sci-fi in there, a little bit that's peeking out, but it's mostly grounded in our reality. You know, stuff like, I guess a good example would be, you know, the stuff like Spike Jonze does, right? You remember like Being John Malkovich or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, creatively, I suppose it's, I mean, part of your craft is sort of, you know, pinpointing what it is you want to do, because you probably can do anything, and you probably can do a little bit of all of it, but it's trying to focus on what, you know, is going to work for you and structure your writing and I guess now directing sort of on that.
I mean, in terms of my personal taste, though, it's funny. Yeah, you come in the industry and you're supposed to sort of like, you know, I'm a sci-fi writer, I'm a horror writer, or whatever, or you know, this is me. But I guess, you know, with me, I've always just been someone who just watches everything. You know, like I'm one of those guys who would go to the New Beverly, this local cinema that Quentin Tarantino owns, and just watch whatever they had on the midnight movies. So like my letterbox or whatever is crazy. It's like I have like, you know, I'll watch a movie like some French movie from the 1960s, and then the next film I follow up with, you know, is like, you know, Next Friday with Ice Cube, you know, or some like silly comedy. You know, I literally watch everything. I don't really have any biases. Like, you know, I'm open to watching rom-coms. I watch a ton of Disney stuff with my kid. And then, you know, when my kid goes to sleep, that's when I bust out the horror, you know, the Ari Aster movies. So like, you know, in terms of my personal taste, yeah, like I would probably, in terms of my writing, it tends to gravitate toward genre.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think my Netflix algorithm is confused. Like, I don't know what to feed you. And I'm big into documentaries. Like, I watch a lot of documentaries. And I mentioned we were guests on someone's podcast. I was like, I'd love to do a documentary about breweries. But I wanted to ask you about your experience with filming documentaries. I know a lot of research goes into it, right?
Yeah, I remember... you know, one of my first job in documentaries was working over at G4 TV, which was this video game network, basically. A lot of the programs was based on video games. So we produced this documentary called Icons, which was sort of a biography of all the different video game makers, or even like a biography on the guy who created, Super Mario Brothers, for example, or created Legend of Zelda. So yes, a lot of research initially goes into that. You're basically almost compiling this big, huge dossier. I remember we used to use these binders. This is back before there was Google Docs, right?
Yeah.
So we would, print out reams of material, about the guy's life, and you almost, and then eventually you go and interview whoever it was, Miyamoto or whatever, and you almost know what his answers are going to be to a certain extent. You've done so much research, but it was always nice to find those little surprises. But so, in a weird way, a lot of the times you almost craft the story beforehand with, and then when the interview comes, you open up yourself to the nice surprises. But there's definitely a lot of research that goes into it. I mean, most of the work is done in pre-production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with you, if we were to look up all information about you, all the stuff you worked on, then it would be kind of hard to have this conversation and be like, oh, I didn't know this. Element of surprises, right? Or an organic conversation that would disappear. And
right.
When I was looking into documentaries, I'm like, how would you keep a conversation where you know the answers that are coming, right?
Yeah, it is different than a podcast, right? Because when you're, depending, unless you're Michael Moore or whoever, the kind of documentarian who appears on camera, for the most part, you're off camera. So you ask those questions knowing that everything that you say is going to be cut out, essentially. So you are, and in documentaries, people tend to speak a little bit differently because it's less casual, right? You're looking for those specific sound bites that are a little bit more dramatic. Mm-hmm. So it is a little bit different in that, if it was just like this, if you're filming and the guy on the other side was just talking like this, it would sort of come across as a little boring just because it's too casual.
Right. Need a little music, a little drama.
Right. Well, people knew the Titanic sunk and they still watched that movie.
Yeah.
You knew the ending before. So.
But you didn't know the whole story.
Right.
Would you ask something?
No, so, is there a way, you probably have some sort of representation or management being in that size industry that you're in. So is there a way that, we have some reach with this podcast. Is there some way that you have a preferred way for people to get a hold of you, or anybody that can reach out and sort of contact you for whatever it may be? I don't know if there's a management team they go through or you personally.
I'm pretty easy to reach. I have reps with the Gotham group. They can reach out that way, but I'm on Instagram as well.
Okay.
Under my name, so it's yeah.
Do you post any videos or hey, upcoming show on Instagram or Facebook or whatever? Do you do any clips that people
funny,
can?
I used to do that more, but I've sort of taken more of a step back from social media. So a lot of my stuff is private now, but when people usually put in requests for friend requests or message me, I usually answer.
Sure. Sure.
When you shoot when you direct a new show or a movie, will you do a preview?
Like a promo of some sort?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure I will, but it, depends, if I like it.
Yeah.
You're always the worst criticizer of your own.
I am. I've directed stuff in the past where I'm here you know what? I'll go to this screening, but I'm not going to tell anyone about it because I don't know if it came out the best.
Well, that makes a quality product. If you can criticize yourself and be hard on yourself, then it's going to make yourself better. If you automatically, like you said, you make the first script you ever made and you think it's awesome and you're gonna pitch that somewhere and it's going to get picked up, it's probably not going to happen.
I remember my last short film. This was years ago. I remember I would go to these film festival screenings. I was one of those guys who just hated being in the theater watching it. So I was sort of like Jerry West, watching basketball. He used to watch games from the tunnel because he couldn't stand, being inside. So I would literally just be out in the lobby or, standing way in the back. And at times I would just leave, because I was just so uncomfortable because I remember just watching it. I'd be looking at all the mistakes I made and all the things that could have been better. And it just drove me crazy.
Yeah. And only you can find them, right? It's like, the mistakes you've made and they're there, but to majority of people, they wouldn't know. And it's tough to criticize your own product, your own work. But I wanted to ask, did you ever get invited to any of the award ceremonies? Like, do they invite writers?
None of the major ones. I'm definitely not there yet. I did during the strike. There was an episode that me and one of my writing partners on that episode wrote. That got an award from it was actually a health conference, I believe, where basically it was about donors and lung donation. Mm-hmm. So we got that, but it was during the strike. So I remember, because of that, we didn't go because it was unclear whether we were allowed to go or not.
Right.
Yeah.
So we ended up not going. But
I'm glad you brought that up. How did the strike affect you guys?
It was about a year ago of this time. I remember walking around a lot, getting a lot of steps in. It was definitely a challenging time. Mm-hmm. If we had to do it over again, I would still say we would do it, just because of the changing landscape in the industry. Mm-hmm. There was sort of this proliferation of mini rooms. Staffs were getting smaller. Writers were not being invited on set anymore, which was something that's traditionally happened in television and is important. There were a host of issues that had to be resolved, and I'm glad that we, were able to do that. So, even though, people look at what's happening now, and there's this huge industry retraction because of all the different mergers, because of just, how Wall Street has reacted to, sort of what's been going on. Like cable television is basically dying as we speak, right?
Yeah. And I've noticed when the strike happened, you could see there's several actors that started podcasts. They're like, well, you can't tell me what I can and cannot say on my podcast. Kind of like, I don't know, just to fight back, I guess, because of a lot of rules of can't say this on public TV or whatever. Right. It seemed like there was a rise in famous people starting podcasts.
Yeah. Right into your neck of the woods, right?
Yeah.
No, we're far from that.
Yeah, they automatically become popular because of their.
They're already popular.
Yeah, they're already popular.
Yeah, it's funny. I was like, how? When did you two start, and how did you start? How did you decide that you wanted to start this podcast? Out of curiosity.
It was just recommended by friends. We go out, camp, and sit around fire and drink beer and just joke, bust balls, and
our families are friends,
our friends were like, "Oh, it'll be funny if you guys had a podcast."
And it's only been about a year and a half or so, maybe a little less.
Yeah, a little over, but beginning of next year it'll be 2 years.
Yeah. By the way, I do like your logo that you have behind you.
Thanks, man.
It almost looks like they could be a Game of Thrones characters with a big sword.
That's when I had hair.
It's inspired by that, and yeah, this is if we were not us, that's what we would be.
Well, I was wondering if any AI has been interfering with writers, any AI softwares, or how fast AI is developing and how widely it's beginning to become like a tool for people, right? Do you guys see that it's beginning to cringe with writers, or is it more of like a tool for you to use as well?
I mean, not personally so far. It hasn't really affected me too much, but I could see where it can, and it may be well. Mm-hmm. I mean, less so for writers, but probably more so for a lot of people working in animation. That's already happening. There's a big strike going on right now, that it is because of that. And, I consider, like, look, it's fun to play around. I've tooled around with Chat GPT. I've experimented with Midjourney, and it's fun. But I definitely put myself in the skeptic camp, for a myriad of reasons. I do think, having worked in tech before, I've worked at a tech company. I've seen how executives like to manipulate data to make their company a little bit more, to make their companies look better for Wall Street. And, so in one sense, I'm a skeptic in that, I do think a lot of these executives are overselling what it can do. I mean, we've seen some beautiful examples, for example, like Sora, like the videos that they release, right? But to do that just takes so much power, energy, and also just the costs of AI right now. I think you're seeing some pushback from Wall Street right now, right? Like billions of dollars, and how is it going to make its money back?
Yeah,
and I think the other thing is, I have a lot of friends, and I know a lot of people who are, starting to, they're taking seminars for AI, and they're doing all these things. They're taking classes, they're experimenting with it, and what's funny is, like, none of them are doing it because they are excited about AI. They're doing it because they're hedging. They're like,
that's right.
What if my job goes away? This is the next big thing. I'm doing this because I need to learn this to be able to make money, right? So I just think that this is something that a lot of corporations are excited about, because, it could be a potentially way to reduce their workforce. But, the average user, are you going to really go and, whatever, type in the prompt every single day? That does get tiresome, right? Like, how many pieces of art are you going to create every day? How many pieces of, like, whatever, some fan fiction will you come up with? And does that really excite anyone? I'm sure there's going to be an AI, movie that's going to come out, and it's going to do well because, naturally people are curious. Just like I was curious about this Kyoto matcha IPA, right? But am I going to go and purchase this IPA again? Probably not, right? So I think there's going to be a hit movie that's going to come out, and people will try to copy that. But at the end of the day, I think, the reason I'm a skeptic is, I get excited because I watch a movie and I'm here like, who directed that? Oh, that was Christopher Nolan. I watched Pulp Fiction. I was like, who was behind that? Quentin Tarantino made that, right? You go to a restaurant, you like a restaurant, and you're like, oh, I wonder who are the hands behind this. And you find that it's like a celebrity chef that you always follow. Right. And I'm sure, let's take beer, for example. I'm sure there's going to be an AI beer that, like some computer sped out the recipe, and it was all made by machines. And all three of us here are going to want to try that drink, right? We're going to try that. But at the end of the day, you go to the craft breweries because that there was like human hands that made that there was passion behind whatever they did, right? Like it had a history.
And we talked to so many brewers that like handwrite all the ingredients, and it's in the notebook. Like they don't use even though technology is in place for them to use it, to be more efficient with it, a lot of them still like handwrite it. And that's part of like the exciting factor of going to a brewery and trying that beer. It's not made by a machine. But what you said with the AI generated movie, I think the first movie is going to suck, but it's going to do well because people are curious. Right. And then it'll get better.
We're like, see, like, what could it do? And, it'll probably be, it'll be interesting. But people are going to learn the wrong lessons from it, right? It's going to make a lot of money, because of this curiosity. And then, of course, executives will be like, oh, we got to keep pumping those out.
I hope it's just going to be a trend, and it's going to be, I think AI is good as a tool. Like I use it as a tool. Or I'll use Midjourney just to make a stupid picture because my friend joked about his dog riding a scooter. So I put his dog on the scooter and like, hey, check this picture out. And we laugh about it, Yeah, but I use it as a tool, and I think that's how far it should go, is become efficient tool for people to use. I hate the idea of a replacing of a person, because
there's no emotion with AI, right?
well, not only that, but like there's like thinking behind it, like how people process information, how something happens and in last second you got to make a decision or put a little emotion behind it when you're talking to another person. So I think those little things kind of matter. And if people if AI is used more like a efficiency tool, then the companies can benefit from productivity of workers, whether it's writers, whether it's a techie person or a program writer. I think it just can be an efficient tool where people can be more productive, and what would take a week to accomplish, we can get it done in a day. And I think that's how we should look forward to implementing AI.
It'll be great for spreadsheets and all the things that you don't want to do in Excel.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
Tristan, we're going to wrap it up here.
Sure.
And it was really a pleasure meeting you. I was excited. It's really cool background. I told you, like, I love documentaries, and, maybe a dream in the future, I'll do some shitty documentary.
You could just make it AI.
No. And I'm looking forward to seeing your work. And I'm hoping in the future, when you publish you direct your first film, we'd love to retouch again and talk more about it and promote it, of course. So people can find you where on social media, you said?
Just under my name. I think I'm easily searched. Apparently there's a wrestler who has the same name as me, so I'm not as cool as the wrestler. I'm the weak link.
Yeah. Oh.
You're the behind the scene wrestler.
Yeah.
Well, Tristan, again, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining a brew with us, and let us know how you like the rest of the bottle. And we look forward to seeing your work and speaking to you in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Nice meeting you, Roman.
You as well.
Hey, Hopheads, Frank here.
And Roman. Welcome to Brews and Banter, the podcast where we sip and spill the funniest stories over a cold one.
We're not just brewing laughs and comedy. We also discuss life stories and current events in every episode.
Follow the frolic on our socials, where we brew up more than just banter. Check out linktree/BrewsNBanter for all the goods.
And guess what? We've got a VIP section. Join our Patreon for exclusive content, behind-the-scenes brew secrets, and maybe even a blooper reel or two.
Subscribe, laugh, and unlock the full Brews and Banter experience. Because life is too short for bad beer and boring stories. Cheers.